Today we're going to be talking about analyzing box plots. And so here's what a box plot looks like. Okay, this is actually the box plot from number one from yesterday. And so what we need to talk about first with this though is that each of these pieces is 25% of the data. So from the minimum all the way up to the maximum would be 100% of the data. That means that from the minimum to the lower quartile is 25%, from the lower quartile to the median is 25%, from the median to the upper quartile is 25%, and from the upper quartile to the maximum is 25%. It doesn't matter that these don't look like they are equal, okay, because they're not, but each of them has 25% of the data in it, okay? So what is the interquartile range? Well, we did this yesterday, and that interquartile range is 7, okay? And that data from yesterday would tell us here that we had 21 as the upper quartile and 14 was the lower quartile. When you subtract those, you get 7, okay? What is the range of the data? So for this one, the maximum was 25 and the minimum was 10. So that means that the range of the data would be 15. What percentage of the data is below 14? So here's 14. 14 is that lower quartile. That means that there's only one chunk of information and one chunk is 25%. Okay? The upper 50% of the data falls between what two numbers? So 50% is two 25%. That means we need the upper two chunks of data. That means that we're starting from the median and going up to the maximum. All right, so the median here from yesterday was, 17. So 17 to the maximum was 25, the upper 50%, okay? The lower 75%, so 75% would be 3 chunks. That means we're starting with the minimum and we're going to the upper quartile, which was 21. So from 10 to 21 is the lower 75% because that's 3 chunks of data. All right, let's take a look at another one. So this is the prices of watches at Target are displayed in the box plot below. So they've even highlighted for us what those 5 important numbers are as well. So if watches under $31 are on clearance, then what percent of watches are on clearance? So we're looking for 31, which is here. There is one chunk that is below that. So that tells us that 25% of the data, or 25% of the watches, are on clearance. If watches from $31 to $71 are on sale, then what percent of watches are on sale? So from 31 to 71, we go 1, 2 chunks. That means we've got 50% of the data. Is the percent of watches between $71 and $120 greater than, less than, or equal to the percent of watches between $16 and $31? So from 71 to 120, that's one chunk, so that's 25%. And 16 to 31 is one chunk, so that's also 25%. So these two are equivalent. Okay, so they're both 25% of the data. The upper 50% of watches falls between what two prices? So upper 50%, 2 chunks, the upper, so we're going to go from the median of $45 to the maximum of $120. Last question dealing with this one, the lower 75% of watches fall between what two prices? So 75% is 3 chunks and it's talking about the lower. So that means we're going to start with the minimum of 16 and we're going to go up to the upper quartile, which is $71. All right. So moving on, we're going to actually talk about what is called a double box and whisker plot. And so this is comparing two different bits of information at the same time. Okay, so we're looking at the average miles per gallon MPG of gasoline used in city driving for 2002 models of small cars and SUVs. Okay, so what's the average number of miles per gallon for a small car? Now, when we're talking about average here, we're talking about the median. So that's going to be 25 miles per gallon. And then for an SUV, they get 16 miles per gallon. And so how many more miles per gallon does a small car get on average compared to an SUV? So that means we're going to take the small and subtract the SUV to get 9 more miles per gallon. Okay? All right. What percent of small cars get less than 25 miles per gallon? So we're looking at the small cars at 25. Less than that, there's 2 chunks. So that means 50% are below. And that means that more than 25 miles per gallon would also have to be 50% because altogether our information has to make 100%. What percent of SUVs get more than 14 miles per gallon? So we have to be looking at SUVs, which is down here. Here's our 14. There's 1, 2, 3 chunks. So that means that 75% of them get more than 14 miles per gallon. What percentage of small cars get a minimum of 19? So small cars, minimum of 19. That means that I want anything that's over 19. Well, the minimum is 19. That means that 100% of the small cars got more than, or got 19 miles per gallon or more as their fuel efficiency. Last one for this, what percentage of SUVs get more than 19% or 19 miles per gallon? So here we're looking at that same 19, but for the sports utility vehicles, for the SUVs, there's only 1 chunk of data. So that means that 25% of SUVs get more than 19 miles per gallon. Okay. So let's look at one more type here. This is just another way of analyzing a box and whisker plot. And so for this, they've given us a box and whisker plot. Here, the box and whisker plot is below the line, which is also fine. And then these are all true-false questions. If it is false, we have to make a correction. If it's true, then it's true and we're good to go. Okay? So let's rock and roll here. All right, the maximum is 96. So looking here, the highest number is 96. So that is true. So I'm going to put a check there. You can put an X there. You could, on your paper, just put a T or an F is fine. The minimum is 66. So remember, the minimum is the absolute lowest. So that is false. In this case, the minimum is 50. The median is 75. So that's the middle line here. That is true. The lower quartile is 66, so that's the left side of our box. That does happen at 66, that's true. The interquartile range is 46. So for interquartile range, we have to take the upper quartile minus the lower quartile, and 85 minus 66 is not 46. It is instead 19. The range or spread of the data is 46. So for range, we have to take the maximum minus the minimum. That does give us 46, so that is a true statement. The upper 25% of the data is between 75 and 85. So 25% means the 1 chunk that is the highest. That means this whisker over here. That is not between those numbers. So we're going to say false. The upper 25% is between 85 and 96. Okay, next question says the bottom 75% of data is between 50 and 85. So that means we're looking for 3 chunks of information to be between 50 and 85. If we look back up here, there are 3 chunks, so that is true. The next one says 50% of the data is between 50 and 75. So there's 1, 2 chunks, that is true. The lower 50% of data is between 66 and 85. So if we're looking at this, the lower 50% means we need to start with the minimum and go to the median. So that is false. We're going to say 50 and 75 for this. And then the last one says the bottom 25% of the data is between 85 and 96. Okay, the bottom 25% of the data is between 85 and 96. That is false. The bottom 25% is between 50 and 66. Okay, so I'll show you all of those things as we go. All right, so analyzing box plots, just making sure that you're remembering that each chunk of information is 25% of the overall data. And that's it.